You here. There is, as always, so much to talk about. There's a dimension of this week's Parsha that I actually have not brought up in our learning yet, and I wanted to bring it up today. I'm channeling the commentary that you can find on YouTube, actually, by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, alav hashalom, of blessed memory, who I miss. We all miss. The loss of Rabbi Sachs over a year ago has been a shockwave through the world, not just the Jewish world. His ability to bring in resonant scientific knowledge, new understandings of the universe, and to connect between his learning and the traditional inherited wisdom that he knew, he mastered. We miss him. And so this is a commentary of his that I'm going to channel forward in my own way. But first, I'm also glad to share two guides that we have generated at UJA. One of them is our guide to Juneteenth, which I'll be speaking about a little bit more directly tomorrow, and our guide to Pride, which is the month of June. We do not only stand for racial justice on Juneteenth, we do not only believe in universal dignity for our LGBTQ plus family and all, but this is a moment where we put effort into gathering resources, marshaling the platform that UJA uniquely has, because our reach and our scope defies even the understanding of people who are central to the work at UJA. And so I want to make sure that you have everything in front of you, right? And so I hope that you will take a look at our guide to Juneteenth and our guide to Pride. It's a beautiful thing to be part of a Jewish community that takes our commitment to universal pride and dignity seriously, to understand that justice is something that we must stand for, and that within our Jewish family and beyond, racial diversity is something to be very proud of, and it requires an examination of history. In that spirit, let's look at this week's Parsha. It's Parshat Beha'alotecha, and I've pointed to the menorah quite a number of times, the different dimensions of it, the unity that is embodied in it. But something else happens in the Parsha. See, we're in the middle of the book of Numbers, of Bamidbar. And Bamidbar is a very complicated book of the Torah. It is actually defined mostly by non-stop rebellions. Moses is doing his best. He really is. And Miriam and Aaron. And they're doing their best. In fact, maybe we could say we're all doing our best. But it is also the case that the people lose patience, and therefore so too does Moshe. Moshe loses patience with the people. Now, it's not the first rebellion. In fact, the complaints here are not so different from the complaints offered in Exodus. And by the way, when I say offered, I mean thrown at Moses. Poor guy. Yes, face-to-face, intimate with God, but poor guy, he's just a person. Even if he transcended typical experiences of humanity, he's just a person. And any person can be tested, especially when they're in a pivotal role of leadership. Standing forward in the breach is very hard to do, and many, many leaders bless us with their commitment to showing up as leaders even and especially when times are tough. Moshe does it over and over and over again. Poor guy. And in this Parsha, he loses his patience. He really does. And he screams at God, Lama harayota, why have you made it so hard for me? I didn't give birth to this people. Answer them or kill me. That's language we don't see him use other times. And in fact, their complaints are not so different this time. Back in Egypt, we had better food. Why did you take us out here? Oi, oi, oi. Not only that, this is the generation of the desert. See, as opposed to the generation that was just liberated, the generation that we encounter during our Pesach story, this was a generation born in the desert. Why is Moshe's reaction so extreme here? He hasn't acted in this extreme way before. So this is a comment by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. There are two kinds of leadership, says Rabbi Sachs, and he's quoting Ronald Heifetz, who is the founder of a leadership center at the John F. Kennedy School at Harvard. So this is Heifetz through Rabbi Sachs. Two kinds of leadership are technical leadership and adaptive leadership. Technical leadership is what happens when, let's say, you have a cold. You go to a doctor, and the doctor says, I know what that is. Take these pills. That's technical leadership. Here's the instruction for how to deal with the challenge you have before you. But there's another kind of challenge that requires something called adaptive leadership. That's when you go to the doctor and the doctor says, I could give you this pill, but you need to change some things about your own patterns of life if you really want to be healthy. You're going to have to sleep better. You're going to have to eat better. You're going to have to exercise. That's adaptive leadership because it requires that the person who has the issue do some adaptive work. I need to adapt because the solution can only come from within. When in the book of Exodus the people were complaining, Moshe offered executive or technical solutions. This is what they need. God says, Moshe, do this. He did this. Plagues, miracles. And he had hoped, we imagine, that they would have evolved since then. They would have learned since then, especially because Moshe now has led them to the edge of the land of Israel, the promised land, and he will not be there. He already knows. Why does he lose his temper so much? Because perhaps he thought to himself, they've changed, they've learned, they can do this, they can adapt. They don't only need the technical solutions, they have learned to adapt. They can begin to be part of the solution to the challenge they face. Now, I'm not saying this is easy. That kind of advice is a very complicated thing to receive. You're going to need to change some things about your life if you truly want to be healthy. But friends, I'm saying it to you and I'm saying it to me. If we truly want to be healthy, and I know we do, if our world truly wants to heal from the ravages that we have been through, not just for the last 2.5 years, but as we celebrate Pride, we know that Pride is a modern response to a whole lot of history that didn't make Pride an experience that came easy for LGBTQ plus people. The Jewish community, along with the rest of the world, has shifted in significant ways, and thank God we recognize the image of God in all of us. We recognize that love is love is love. We fight for equality. We fight for dignity for our LGBTQ sisters and brothers and for our neighbors. So too with the history of slavery and Jim Crow and the degradation of people based on race. The lack of respect shown to black people, the lack of respect shown to people of color, not only in this country, but especially in America. The Jewish community, just like the rest of America, has evolved to a place where racial justice and pride is something that we know we must stand for, but that has not always been the case. And Juneteenth is a reminder of how recently things began to change, and how inadequate our responses are to date, until adaptive leadership becomes our response, until we adapt, which is another way of saying change. In order for us to be healthy, in order for justice to be the true experience of our community, adaptive leadership is required. And that doesn't mean white, straight people need to change. It means that leadership in the Jewish community needs to change too, until it's not white people talking about pride and straight people talking about pride and white people talking about Juneteenth. The leaders of our community need to reflect our community. And thank God that has begun. Thank God in some sectors of the Jewish community and in America, that has been the case now for decades. But decades doesn't mean centuries, and centuries doesn't mean millennia. And we as a Jewish people have continued to adapt since the very first moment of our existence. Abraham was the Ivri. Ivri is the Hebrew that leads to the word Hebrew. Ivri, Hebrew. But what does Ivri really mean? Boundary crosser. The very inception of our people was the call from God to change. So too may we be blessed not only to offer technical solutions, which are important, may we be blessed to also recover our ability to adapt, to learn flexibility, to step forward and sometimes to step back so that others can step forward. In order to truly adapt, I need to be ready, as Moshe had to be ready, to not be the one in front. That is a complicated and beautiful facet of what it is to be a human being. What Moshe had a hard time with this parsha. So offering compassion and love to Moshe, and compassion and love to all of us, may we be blessed to find adaptive leadership a little bit less uncomfortable, a little bit more welcome. And when we need help doing so, may we ask for it. That'll be a real gift to the people who turn to us for guidance. Here we go, friends. Let's have a good day. We'll see each other tomorrow. Bless you, friends. See you tomorrow.